From Demon Souls to Bloodborne, I've spent a lot of time boasting about how experience and knowledge defy difficulty, while many bosses retain their ferocity, in equal amount aged into stompable pipsqueaks. Will Elden Ring be the exception? With much less time under my belt, I've far from mastered what lies in the lands between. This game is at its best when you use the many tools at your disposal to exploit weaknesses. I am far less experimental, deferring to unga-bunga builds with little faith, intelligence, or innovation. When I first played the DLC, I opted for dual great stars since you can obtain 2 in a single new game cycle, and I had heard they were pretty great. This time around, I decided to do the exact same build. This only being my second playthrough of Shadow of the Erdtree, I wanted to give a point of comparison using the same tools. Forgive me for not bending the knee to commenters saying it's OP, I'm pretty sure even a raw soup ladle wouldn't satisfy those measuring their Zweihanders. I'll be pitting mine against every Remembrance boss from base game to DLC, with a few notable great enemies sprinkled in. I had to make cuts to keep this from being a multi-hour epic. I don't think you'll be sorry to see bosses like Fia's Chumps and the valiant Gargleballs go. In return, I'll be power stancing this ranking, ordering bosses based on difficulty while assigning quality grades for a worst to best tier list. This is the Elden Ring bosses ranked from easiest to hardest and worst to best. Number 29, Sir Gideon Ofnir, the All-Knowing. Ah, I knew you would come, to stand before these hands, catching them with the brittlest of glass jaws. What a sad state of affairs. I had high hopes for this battle, that we'd struggle together unto eternity. Instead, Whittle Baby Ofnir doesn't even get to finish this speech before he's shouting bone-born prophecies that'll be shattered harder than a skeleton in about 10 minutes. A man can kill a god, and certainly you. Did I include such a pushover solely so we'd have a benchmark for the lowest difficulty imaginable? Perhaps. The real reason is I want to gush about his design. Employing skills gained from knowledge you've shared of the Shard Bearers to prevent your ascent to lordship is a brilliant concept. Establishing him as a trustworthy ally in your quest, only to have him stand in your way before the finish line, is a great character arc. It's worthy of a B in quality even with execution steamrolled by endgame stats, even before hyperinflation from the Shadowtree's bountiful runes. Number 28, Regal Ancestor Spirit. This fight always goes one of 2 ways for me. I get there too early and I'm subjected to an endless cycle of healing teleports, making it a slog. Or I get there too late and make Rudolph see red in seconds. Because the first option isn't fun, I always end up leaving it for the latter. That leaves little to say in terms of difficulty, other than there being enough potential for it to actually hit you that it does get the edge on Gideon. Unlike Sir Ofnir, I'm afraid I can't praise the spirit's design. The concept of stealing wildlife powers around it is excellent, but rarely comes into play before it's dead. The teleports only serve to frustrate as a result, with the healing making an overly simple battle feel bloated. I can at least appreciate the beauty of it all with extraordinary sound design to match, but that's only enough to ride into D tier. Number 27, Godric the Grafted. If there's any boss that tumbles far below what he deserves, it's Godric. He's an excellent follow-up to Margit as an introductory lord, the music is fire, the concept of grafting a dragon to amplify his moveset is sick, he has plenty of fair downtime both between combos and attacks, which create high skill ceiling opportunities to weave offense. I love what Godric brings to the table, he's an easy A for quality. The problem is he's an afterthought these days with no real incentive to kill him early. I leave him far past his bedtime, where he can do little to withstand endgame power. Number 26, Meteor, Mother of Fingers. There's a good chance some of you had different expectations for Meteor's ranking. All I can say is what moves she's shown me in my 2 encounters were simple to dodge, even if she supposedly has some that are scarier. I've never seen them thanks to this knotted ball of finger flesh being a bleed pinata. At least the setup with the ruins and the creepy finger pope is neat, enough to earn it a passing C grade. Even if getting the transdimensional suck from the Elden Ring worms is more maddening than the majority of this list. Number 25, Rennala, Queen of the Full Moon. I can explain this ranking in one phrase: Deacons of Raya Lucaria, at least for the first phase. The second can be threatening if you tank spells or get overwhelmed by her summons. But with enough experience under your belt, dodge and response is effortless. An example being exploiting her Comet Azure for free uptime. The mechanics are stellar, with a wide variety of spells, familiars, and melee in a pinch to keep you on your toes. It is the best true caster boss FromSoft's ever made, yet it's held back by early game balancing and a pacified first phase, enough to suppress her to B tier. Number 24, Godskin Duo. I once would have been ready to rage at the bullshittery that is this obnoxious pair. Sharing a health bar girthier than Noble's waistline with no permanent KO for killing both at once is such a strange decision. The DPS rush and strategy required to best both before their ally resummons them was tremendous. And seeing that health bar persist and the boss reappear out of thin air was frustrating. Throw in environmental aggro splitters that are barreled over quite literally by the Noble, no aggro balancing for a 2v1 without spirit summons, and damage output to punish easy to mistake errors with near instant death, and this would have been my choice for one of the game's hardest bosses. So how in Grey Godfrey's Ghost does Godskin Duo barely claw above bottom tier punching bags, making them go nighty-night. 3 to 4 St. Trina's arrows per boss, and it's lights out for them. Putting the first to sleep evens the odds, and ultimately allows you to DPS rush both as they awake like striking dummies. Because with their partner snoozing, they can't resummon each other, allowing you to freely slay them back and forth. The only difficulty is in the initial sleep. Apostle is shifty if you don't fire during attack animations, but as long as you bring enough sleep resources, you'll have no problems giving them nightmares. This is the perfect example of my assertion that Elden Ring is best countered with extensive game knowledge. Putting bosses to sleep is something you'd so rarely expect to work. I can't blame anyone for not even considering it. With the knowledge widely shared years later, their once oppressive battle is now a relaxing lullaby. I won't pretend I don't get a sick thrill exploiting them after the early days, and that joy is the only thing keeping them out of F tier. Number 23, Morgott the Omen King. The warden of the game's most severe difficulty spike, besting Margit's final form is required to ascend Elden Ring's difficulty mountaintops. This was quite the challenge in my first playthrough. I did not explore well enough, bringing a half-upgraded golden halberd to the table. Now knowing how to scale with ease before accessing Lane Dell, he can hardly withstand my force. For context, the only bosses on this list I faced before him in order were Radahn, Rykard, Astel, and Rellana. And I only killed Rellana so I could marry her daughter ASAP. You need to do very little boss slaying to become a god, especially of the Somber Stone variety. This makes his moveset meaningless. Mash and bash him until he shits his pants all over the arena, before swiftly disemboweling him into a feeble disgrace. Thrashing the Omen King doesn't reduce his stellar voice acting, killer arena, compelling arc, and well-designed kit. It's enough to earn him a B grade. It's just a shame he wasn't given more defense to weather the storm of completionist explorers raiding his capital. Number 22, Mohg, Lord of Blood. How about his bloody brother? I went in guns blazing, carelessly attacking without watching my HP, and got wrecked. I thought, alright, Mohg still got it. Maybe I was just too aggressive. Nah, let me try again, and the rest is history. If you chunk his health enough during attacks, then keep hitting him as he counts to 3, it was possible to stun, riposte, and kill him without even getting to the countdown. I had my Physic Remedy and Shackle locked and loaded, only for their acquisition to be a waste. I did notice my Lion's Claw timing perfectly evaded his counting slashes with ducking recovery, and while I'd love to say that was calculated, it was not. Trading HP for full aggro is worth it to avoid his second phase, which is significantly harder. But here's the thing, you can't rank what you don't see. You might consider this a fluke, but I got the same kill before the DLC dropped, only a bit later into the fight. If any curb stomp, this one made me far and away the most disappointed. I adore Mohg's fight. Counting mechanic is brilliant, adding unprecedented pressure and healing management without the physic. I love how well the angles of his trident can be exploited with strafing, and clever animation angling to keep uptime. His second phase amplifies the threat with increased range, blood flame puddles stressing deliberate positioning, and bonkers damage. All of that with killer voice acting, a stunning arena, one of the game's best themes, and now being the gatekeeper to an entire DLC. Mohg's significance is greater than ever. It's just a shame how hard Lion's Claw posture breaks clobbered him. Even so, I'm admitting my bias, the extent of his design is too great to fall below S tier. Number 21, Godfrey, First Elden Lord. Continuing our run on great bosses trivialized by OP scaling, the First Elden Lord is more kitty cat than lion these days. You may not carry shadow fragments into the lands between. You do, however, carry the absurd amount of runes and resulting levels the DLC awards. I had more stats than I knew what to do with by this point. Using that in tandem with the Claw Talisman, Power Stance, Air Spam, and Lion's Claw shows him who the real Lord of the Wilds is. And yet, like the few entities preceding him, minimized difficulty isn't enough to diminish everything great about Godfrey. I love the jumpable stomps and the slow-drawn attacks you can sneak hits between, Hoarlu's weird wind-ups that mix odd-angle melee, and grabs slam dunking your HP into the dumpster are amazing. There's larger-than-life animations like the power bomb and roaring stomps. And the sheer magnitude of facing the first Elden Lord as you stand before the finale, on my name as D-Mod. It would be a crime to award him anything less than A tier. Number 20, Radagon and Elden Beast. The punctuation mark to the finale Gideon and Godfrey build is this showdown against Radagon and the greater will made manifest. The already excellent menu theme getting an action rendition to signal the finale is a chilling callback. Radagon's weighty swings and golden magic illuminate the ambient smog of Shattered Will. It's a breathtaking experience that ascends to godlike spectacle as Elden Beast arrives. Its eldritch and ethereal appearance inspires an otherworldly awe that still drops my jaw to this day. The only thing holding the beast back was mobility that far exceeded the players in a gargantuan arena, an issue finally addressed 2 years later in the DLC's biggest upgrade. Torrent now fully enabled. It was clear many attacks were nullified through the steed's use, never being intended to have this kind of evasive speed, but there's an equal amount of attacks to prevent careless plotting and swinging. Beating a dead horse is an apt description for what I'm about to say. DLC scaling, it's a lot. I would have once ranked this near the top 10 in difficulty, but these days Radagon and a nerfed Elden Starlord are much more muted. Minor tension lost hardly reduces their quality, with the Elden Beast editions making this an A-tier battle that's greater than ever before. Number 19, Romina, Saint of the Bud. This toxic flower is the kind of low-pressure difficulty I appreciate. In comparison to many of her DLC peers, she's paced much more methodically. There are lots of good, clear openings for the player, plenty of time to dodge tells, all the while she still has enough variety in them to reward good pattern recognition. It helps that she's a big target, making it easy to hit her. She covers this weakness by hitting from multiple angles with her centipede legs and weapon, later adding in butterfly bombs to tighten positioning. It's nothing overly demanding, which makes it a nice vacation in an otherwise very sweaty DLC. An enjoyable experience worthy of A tier. Number 18, Scadutree Avatar. The true best bud in the DLC is the Shadow Sunflower. It's an immaculate spectacle of wilted flora amidst tainted sap, matched well by explosive thorn effects. Like Romina, the Avatar attacks with hefty damage at a gentler pace. Reminiscent of Dark Eater Midir, all attacks have clever ways to dodge, and then smack away at the noggin weak point with maximum uptime. Or you can smack the stock for less, but still worthwhile damage. This is balanced by its 3 phases, which require you to riposte. It reawakens with full health and a few new moves each time. The vroom vroom charges that follow never fail to make me laugh. And the burst light AoE looks amazing, like the light is cracking out from the shadows. Maybe this is a hot take, but in spite of its brittle HP and balanced moveset making this easy in comparison to some of the DLC's faster juggernauts, I adore this fight as one of Elden Ring's best, giving it the rare SS tier that only a few bosses today will see. Number 17, Astel, Natural Born of the Void. Space Amygdala is fine. Mitigate and tank damage to get at the head, knock it before the teleport for better uptime, and heal through mistakes in the generous downtime. Dodging isn't too challenging outside of some large AoEs. You'll have a harder time consistently hitting the head as it wiggles around. Astel is inoffensive. My only gripe is that it doesn't feel fun to fight, knocking it into D tier. Number 16, Lich Dragon Fortisax. Forgive me for the terrible, juvenile humor, but this boss Forta sucks. It is a shit show of lighting effects while I'm hugging its non-existent dong, listlessly ankle biting until it finally croaks. Don't even get me started on the DLC variant in the water. If it wasn't an electric type Pokemon, I'd throw a toaster in the puddle and be done with it. No matter how many times I try to handle this battle head on, I always end up being a feet sniffer. Appropriate to end a quest that involves the longest hug animation in gaming history. I want to shake the hand of the dev who worked on this, it's so delicate. I will at least say Fortisax's attacks look cool. Problem is I spend so much time in its crotch, I rarely see any of it. The difficulty is tank and spank like most bosses thus far. The tank is merely getting more dangerous as we progress. As for quality, an appropriate F for Fortisax. Number 15, Divine Beast, Dancing Lion. This parade float, on the other hand, uses its effects to create diverse visual eye candy that well illustrates the boss's variety of tells. While the elemental cycling is its biggest strength, I also enjoy the chaotic rhythm with its swirling around as it melees. I also appreciate the audio cues for things like the grab, with the double jaw smack. The punishment for getting grabbed is so unique as well. Healing to recover also heals the boss. It gives you an active decision to make. Do you heal to prepare for further mistakes, or do you resist to prevent recovery for the lion? For that reason, it's easily an A-tier fight for me, though I'd treat the open world variant with Blight and a gang of googly eyes much more harshly. As for the difficulty, I didn't struggle much here in either playthrough, especially in my second, where you can get 17 fragments without fighting a single boss, which is pretty crazy. Coming back with 20 scaling allows you to, sorry for the broken record, tank and spank. Even when I wasn't aware of that option, the Divine Line remains middle of the road. Number 14, Rellana Twin Moon Knight. Like the lion, Rellana cannot withstand 20 blessings. You could make the argument you shouldn't have that many when you fight her, but if it only requires defeating Gaius, Romina, and Messmer, why not go for it? Regardless of your power, she's always been staggerable with good pressure. The key for locked-in abilities like Lion's Claw is to bait combos and hyper armor through them. If you do it when she isn't animation locked, she loves to sidestep and counter. There's certainly skill involved in finding the right times to attack her. I'd like to try a dex build in the future where you weave attacks in between hers. With Strength, Stagger, and Bleed, I didn't even see phase 2. That phase's damage is overkill regardless of counting your blessings, with magic imbued counter hits slicing 50 plus HP investment like butter. I do love the moon attack at least, and I do think there's a terrifying beauty in the way her animations look like a dance. And the high-low soul arrows are neat observation tricks for potential delays. There is a lot to love about her design, enough to land a solid B grade. But I'd argue her attack uptime is overtuned to the point it welcomes you seeking out a ton of blessings to stomp her through scaling alone. Number 13, Rykard, Lord of Blasphemy, Praetor of Badassery. The Great Serpent and Lord Lurking Within remain an unforgettable experience I will always cherish. FromSoft tried iterations of this special weapon fight in both Demon Souls and Dark Souls 3, both using the Storm Roller to different effect. The Serpent Killer is an evolution of this design, allowing an intuitive moveset with lights, heavies, jump attacks, weapon arts, the works. It never fails to amaze me how intuitive it feels to use this weapon. Its considerable range allowed them to develop a fight framed around a single combat style, leading to near perfection. The Serpent has a deep move pool that Rykard expands upon massively. His greatest pressure comes from the tracking Flame Skull, giving you both the boss and its pursuit to keep track of. Knowledge of stagger timings can help manipulate him out of attacks, well-timed jumps and positioning can increase offensive opportunities, and the Skull Rain feels like you're outrunning hell itself. I've had considerable practice killing Rykard early in speedruns when he can one-shot you, so that helps diminish his difficulty greatly when I have a lot more HP. That and upgrading the spear with the game's free-flowing Somber Stones to speed up your victory. I hope that we can join in together, as we rank this as an SS tier bout I regard as an all-timer in FromSoft's history. Number 12, Loretta, Knight of the Haligtree. The Tree Sentinel archetype is notable enough I found her worth including. From my tradition of slaying the base sentinel the moment I awake, to Lanedel's thunderous guardian, down to the depths of the Haligtree where Loretta awaits, the many sentinels in the lands between solidify a difficulty baseline for the game. They are the first boss I would argue can outdo scaling through sheer force, such as Loretta obliterating endgame HP with a quick double magic slice. Her spells all hit like a truck, with many having strong tracking and fast tells to delivery speed. I appreciate how tightly designed their attack hitboxes are, allowing you to juke the halberd for adept punishes once you well understand their patterns. Tree Sentinel's presence throughout your journey is a welcome one, worthy of A tier. Number 11, Fire Giant. I've come a long way from my initial days of going to bat for this behemoth. The visual design and sheer scale is mesmerizing. How they managed to frame such a size mismatch with the camera from a distance and make things somewhat reasonable to manage visually up close is truly a marvel. While you can't see everything in ankle-biting range, the way the feet move give indications of what attack is coming. What makes the fight frustrating is how often he barrel rolls a mile away. It may help reframe things, but it's a pain to constantly dash after him flawlessly, only for him to snow scoop half of your health away. The second phase makes this so much worse, trading easy access ankle hitboxes for his flighty wrists. And there are so many absurd fire attacks in this phase that amount to run away or die. It's a slog to deal with, especially when you get bad RNG chaining these attacks back to back, dwindling healing resources for daring to suggest you get a turn. There is a lot of good here, and even if it doesn't work perfectly, I admire the effort to upscale to mountainous proportions. The visuals carry that mixed experience into the top of C tier, a good mark of his just above average difficulty to boot. Number 10, Dragon Lord Placidusax. In contrast, the more I take on Placidusax, the greater my appreciation grows. Presentation once again is incredible. Elden Ring never misses on spectacle. Seeing a mirror of the twin fingers in draconic form stand frozen before you is chilling. They once again managed to take an oversized target and give it reasonable tells when the camera is overloaded with its girth. Watching the way the dragon shifts, sound cues for roars, the direction the heads move, and later when it dissipates out of reality, there are many ways to prepare for what's incoming while still reaming into its side. Whereas I find Fortisax's persistent lightning on the player to be annoying because he does other moves at the same time, Placidusax's lightning AoEs keep him stationary, allowing for well-timed offense between each shockwave. As Placidusax begins teleporting, you must pay attention to both the tell and the direction of his cleaves, pulling into your range with a variety of slams and slashes. You have to perfectly time evasion to escape unscathed. I'm still blown away how fluid this all feels with his size in mind. His high HP, damage, and mobility make for a battle sure to shave at least a few flasks off of you, leading to death if careless. It all feels incredibly fair and fun, landing the Dragon Lord safely into S tier. Number 9, Starscourge Radahn. Riding into battle against Radahn is a moment that is rarely rivaled. The rancor of the festival and the tragedy of his tale sets a legendary stage, one that asks you to traverse what feels like an entire desert to reach him. The sight of the arrows chasing me as he hobbles along on Leonard in his pursuit is both hilarious and electrifying. He may not compare to his prime, but Radahn's husk is no slouch. His range, damage output, speed of attack, brutal gravity magic pose far more of a threat than anything thus far. You can use his size against him with certain attacks, swiftly rounding behind to booty smack until he imbues his sword with gravity. This sequence is scripted, allowing you to position max melee at his behind and keep the pressure on. Through stagger, bleed, and a hefty dose of somber upgrades, you can end his madness before he even reaches the second phase. If he gets the opportunity, attacks are certainly more imposing there. None more than his Comet Descent if the initial nerfs are to be believed. I never thought it was that hard to dodge, but one-shotting players was cruel. Frankly, what makes Radahn more manageable for me is horseback. I find him far harder when he's doing laps around you, making him harder to read. No matter how I take him on, he always gets at least a few licks in. Chaining enough together in a short time still leads to a death here and there, which is the true difficulty barrier we're passing. I feel confident I could go play right now and one-shot any boss outside the top 10. Radahn is the mark of that no longer being the case. It only gets more difficult from here on out. As for the warrior holding back the stars themselves, the grandeur of his battle, the option to turn it into a raid boss with festival mates in tow, the excellent design of his ranged and melee kit, and a brilliant setup to it all earns Radahn a spot in high A tier. Number 8, Midra, Lord of Frenzied Flame. If my playstyle is encapsulated by any boss, it's gotta be this incarnation of madness. A humanoid figure running on pure chaos. It attacks without end, often with frenzied flames bursting at the seams. This all creates very oddly paced attacks with very hard to read delays and spins. He goes from deceptively slow to blistering speed in seconds, with varying acceleration. I love how it feels as if the madness is boiling out of control. The comparison to myself is less that I'm insane and wielding my spine as a greatsword, more so I love how frenetic and at times nonsensical his offense feels. Unga Bunga is my FromSoft love language. Let's not forget the terrifying interlude through a forest littered with rotted vermin and invincible wardens. Finally entering the mansion, you're given fair warning to turn back, lest you be subject to his frenzy. I previously thought his crazed attack density was too much, but I've grown to realize there is fair time to heal and put up your own dukes if you're purposeful about seizing it. The whole dance feels less like a waltz and more like tap dancing on landmines, and I love every S tier second of it. Number 7, Malekith the Black Blade. Should have the surname Glass Cannon. Malekith hits like high-powered artillery with what feels like the smallest HP pool in the endgame. As the ranking indicates, this only serves to keep him balanced, not diminish his difficulty. The Beast Clergyman phase is reasonable to deal with. Lots of attacks are jumpable, which is particularly helpful thanks to his hunched lean, making many attacks whiff. This is especially true thanks to his predisposition to backstep with many attacks, removing your window to counter. This carries over into the hypercharged second phase, where his attack point is far ahead of the actual hitbox. This requires you to learn his patterns and where recovery from his animations have him land. Careful positioning and evasion earns you the right to get a hit in. In between, you'll likely be subjected to a half-dozen assaults with him leaping airborne, firing flame slices, zipping across with a spin to win, backflipping with a judgment cut, or doing a fiery AoE. There are slight variations in many attacks, making that precise positioning all the more difficult. That's on top of many of his attacks inflicting HP burn, depleting your precious max reserves, forcing you to match his glass cannon nature. Pinning Malekith down is a severe challenge, one that warrants him ranking this highly even though it only takes a few attacks to win. That pursuit is one of the game's most exhilarating in all the right ways, earning him the top spot in S tier. Number 6, Commander Gaius. Let Shadow of the Erdtree's reign on crushing difficulty commence. Gaius was the first boss I fought this time around for his precious 5 shadow fragments. Taking him on with 17 was helpful. You know what wasn't? Using a bunch of revered ash to buff Tauren. My donkey gets skewered in seconds by Gaius and his trusty warthog. Okay, sure, let's fight him on the ground then like Tree Sentinel, using angles and understanding of his moves to gain an advantage. Fat chance. He likes to ride circles around you rather than recover from attacks, preferring jousts that keep him on the move. The resulting camera work is nauseating, making evasion and landing vertical hits more troublesome than it might appear. Adding gravity attacks with massive hitboxes, and melee hits that rear backward out of your reach like Malekith, without the glass cannon HP to compensate, and it allowed Gaius to exploit my bad habits like excessive greed and dodging backward instead of in. The lesson for Gaius that will ring true in a lot of the upcoming ranks is that trying to ballerina around his offense with perfect evasion and then finding precise attack windows was a fool's errand. It was far more fruitful to push my hyper armor advantage with Lion's Claw and trade hits where I could, like his charge with a disgusting active hitbox that I couldn't dodge. I didn't bother to try. Tank the hit with a Guts Plunge. I may as well shave some HP off of him if I'm gonna get walloped. When it boils down to it, Gaius feels like a way worse Tree Sentinel, with janky movement and hitboxes that make this D-tier bout more frustrating than fun. Number 5, Messmer the Impaler. This is where I may disappoint some of you. In my eyes, Messmer is not some new standard by which quality should be defined. He's by no means bad. I think he's good, but he's more of the same we've had to this point in our A and B tier encounters. Stellar voice acting and presentation, and an impressive moveset that has room for the player to grow into finding windows of opportunity, razor thin as they may be. I personally did not enjoy that learning experience as much as most seem to. His Crimson Flames obscured tells in a way that I found obtuse, his lengthy combos with varied delays didn't have an intuitive rhythm, and I was particularly whelmed by the second phase, with serpent hitboxes and movement that felt excessive in a bad way. For every attack that feels this way, there's just as many, if not more, that are clearly illustrated from the get-go. The rhythm is something you can learn, as unnatural as it felt, and admittedly the snake is a cool set piece, even if it's overwhelming. I'll be honest, this is one of those bosses I feel really pressured to praise blindly because I know how well loved he is. Maybe if I ate up the marketing materials beforehand to build his presence, I would have been more invested, but I went completely dark on DLC trailers. Watching them in hindsight, it's really baffling these weren't included in the game in some way. My second playthrough didn't result in much better success here. I won by plowing through his moves that I was mediocre at dodging at, and won in a way that felt undeserved. Someday I would love to go back and really learn his moveset beat by beat to see if my impressions improve. At the very least, I do commend his difficulty and hope what praise I did offer for this A-tier encounter came through. Number 4, Putrescent Knight. While my lukewarm reception for Messmer is going to be unpopular, I hope we can all agree that Putrescent Knight is extra strength booty cheeks. If there's a single word this experience elicits, it's annoying. Whether it's ramming Frostbite up my ass, spamming its millennia-long wombo combo, forcing me out to hop over cheeky Frost Flames, or doing drive-bys that give no reasonable opportunity to counter, this entire experience puts you on the defensive 99% of the time. It's boring, inflates the difficulty margin well beyond the limits of reason, and lacks the balance other glass cannon designs like Malekith have. It is handily my choice for the worst boss in the game, one of only 2 Fs in the entire roster. Number 3, Baal the Dread. For as much as Putrescent grinds my gears, there's perhaps no boss in the game that I agonize over more than Baal. He is so close to rivaling Dark Eater Midir for the series' greatest dragon fight, standing out well in a game full of them. He rivals the greatest spectacle in a game full of phenomenal set pieces. The ascent to the peak builds up the climax to perfection. His moveset is a great mixture of ranged, melee, gap closers, and backsteps. Evasive timing is tight yet fair. Damage output requirements are very high in a satisfying way. Earning openings feels rewarding, mostly. My first issue is Baal lacks the recovery balance Midir shines so brightly for. If he left his head hanging for a hair longer each time, good positioning would be far more satisfying, capitalizing on your skill. Instead, Baal often animation cancels his recovery into another attack, which removes your turn. An example of this is the leap away into Fire Breath. This option necessitates you waiting until you're absolutely sure the combo is done, and if he does, he'll often rear his head backward at the start of a long delayed tell for what's coming next. While Egon's short arc and voice acting are extra in all the right ways, I fear being intended to summon him was meant to circumvent this issue. But when you do, this battle becomes a striking dummy, veering into unsatisfying territory for the opposite reason, being too easy to hit. These issues, in addition to a wonky camera, turn solo battles into more of a crotch-hugging experience like Fortisax, which removes much of the spectacle. It also takes longer to kill this way, which is a slog, but the difficulty difference is night and day. When I was going for the head, I had half a mind to rank him even higher. When I relented and went for the legs and tail, it only took me 2 attempts to win, so I opted for a difficulty high ground. Bale's attacks are fearsome, boasts some of the best range in the game, his health pool is massive, and his ability to exploit what are usually advantageous windows for you is brutal. I still feel Bale is worthy of A-tier recognition, I just wish he was reined in ever so slightly to make skull bashing more viable solo. Number 2, Malenia, Blade of Miquella. The juggernaut of the base game has been dethroned by my measure. That makes her no less fearsome. From the opening words, that she has never known defeat, you'll feel the chilling confidence in every strike you take. These are attacks that have some of my favorite tells of any FromSoft boss. From the way she whirls around the arena, quick steps, backdashes, leaps, and slides the blade with sparks, there are so many subtle ways to detect Malenia's next move. The on and off nature of her aggression gives peaks and valleys of intensity that never let you find a comfortable rhythm. And when you knock a third of her HP down, all bets are off with Waterfowl Dance. This move remains as absurd as ever. Half arena tracking with the first flurry, then straight on into 180 AoE burst to end the remaining 2. The only thing that's changed is me. I'm sure many of you who've trekked to the Haligtree's roots many times can attest to this. Waterfowl is still demanding, but more often than not, I'm able to rise to the challenge. I do it through pure dodging, but you could also bring Frostpots to stun her, or use Bloodhound Step to gain considerable distance. There are so many ways to best Waterfowl. It was always my sole blemish on her record. I could never decide if it was balanced or if it treaded too close to unfair, and I think I've finally reached my conclusion. Strictly as a learning experience, its animation is too overwhelming to digest and diagnose. It leads to frustration initially, but once you understand its strengths and weaknesses, it's another move to best like anything else. The power is in your hands to do so, and damn if I don't find seizing it satisfying. The other predominant complaint of Malenia is her lifesteal. However, I've found it increasingly insignificant as my performance has improved, to the point that I barely notice it these days. With those barriers to greatness knocked away, Malenia's tremendous design shines through. Excellent combat mechanics, fair if unpredictable reprieve, stellar voice acting, a beautiful and haunting transformation, a second phase that builds upon the first and adds enough spice to distinguish itself, and a learning experience that, while rough, prepares you for a lifetime of rematches on equal footing. She is the peak of not only Elden Ring boss design, she has an argument for the greatest in the entire extended Souls universe. She earns today's only triple S ranking, a high note I wish I could end the video on. Unfortunately, we need to pay her brother and his consort their due. And the number 1 hardest boss in Elden Ring, promised Consort Radahn. I've tipped my hand already, so I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. I don't like promised Consort Radahn. His first phase is a novel reimagining of a fan favorite in his prime. That phase is well balanced, with a fun moveset holding callbacks to the original design in a few of the body of Moog he inhabits. That is the extent of my praise, and it's the only thing that saves him from F tier. My disdain is equally short. In spite of the nerfs, Phase 2 remains a clusterfuck of holy flashbangs that isn't fun to manage in the slightest. This eyesore is matched by constant barrages of hits so frequent it feels impossible to evade it all. You either learn to dodge perfectly again and again and again at a pace no other boss in the game asks of you, amidst sensory overload, or you block. Outranging things isn't a wise option, thanks to his many attacks having huge AoEs and roll catches for careless backsteps. I did my best to dodge in more, as I'm well aware panic rolling for the hills is a weakness of mine. My efforts to find holes in the holy to keep my uptime were fruitless. At least yeeting myself away gave me distance to recover and react. I opted for the same strategy as my first win, build stagger in phase 1 into an immediate posture break in phase 2, continuing to build bleed and stagger as best I could. I was far from good at this. Sometimes my phase 1s went too well, stunning him early. Other times my mind drifted to phase 2, punishing me for my lapse in focus with not enough stagger built at all. Even when I executed the start of this plan perfectly, building off of it for the rest of Phase 2 was a nightmare. I am sure there's going to be cries for me to get good, and my opinion is invalid if I say he's bad because he's too hard. Well, I beat him in 13 attempts to Malenia's 4. For my second time facing him, I don't think 13 attempts is too bad. I'm sure it'll be less if I ever face him again, but I honestly don't think I'm gonna bother. Not because I fear him, but because I loathe the experience. I find no joy in brute forcing my way to a win, feeling as if I've learned nothing, and only got lucky with RNG that he didn't quite blind me to death. Is he difficult? Yes, more so than any other Elden Ring boss. Is it fun to overcome that difficulty? Promise Consort Radahn is the rare case in the series where my answer is no. It doesn't help that thematically, rehashing Radahn is a lame choice. We rely on a weak post-fight cutscene to justify this as Miquella's master plan. It's unabashed fan service ham-fisting a conclusion I feel like nobody asked for. At least I didn't. Let me just say, I hate ending the video on this note. I know that I've made 2 videos in the past criticizing Elden Ring bosses, and while I feel that a lot of my criticism in those videos is still valid, if you look at the tier list, you'll notice that I love and appreciate Elden Ring's bosses far more than I dislike them. Malenia, Rykard, Shadowtree, Malekith, Mohg, Placidusax, and Midra would top most games' boss rankings on their own. And that's not to snub Radagon, Elden Beast, Godfrey, Bale, the real Radahn, Tree Sentinel, Godric, Romina, Divine Lion, Morgott, Messmer, Rennala, Rellana, and even Sir Gideon Ofnir. They would all be strong additions to any boss roster. And that's nothing to say of the game's bountiful mini-bosses with quality swelling well beyond the promised consort. Looking outside the bosses, Elden Ring is a wondrous game to explore. There's so many secrets, clever puzzles, fascinating characters, and brilliant world building. This all is matched by phenomenal agency in how you choose to tackle it. Taking up the task is a joy every time I return to the Lands Between, even if its hardest challenge is more chore than chum. Again, even if I've had my criticisms for the game, I can look past what I want from it and instead appreciate it for what it is. Elden Ring is a triumph in so many respects, what I'm glad has found tremendous success. Ranking bosses in FromSoft games is where I first found success. There was a comfortable nostalgia revisiting these games one last time before I lay them to rest. As FromSoft has branched out into new and creative ventures, I too want to bring more to the table than being the Souls ranking guy. If you haven't already, checked out my first attempt at ranking a sample of games in a specific theme, the first episode being on action, featuring games I think the FromSoft faithful will love. I hope to bring many new forms of content to you on a more consistent basis in 2025. Thank you all so much for coming along for the ride. I'll see you soon in the next video.